Good morning, and thank you for joining us online again. My co-pastor, David Ketchum, and I have been hosting a conversation about the sermon on Zoom every Sunday at 4 p.m. We've had several different Zoom meetings during the pandemic, but I think as time goes on, people are increasingly less interested in going to Zoom meetings. So if you want us to keep this one alive, we want to be available to our listeners, but if you want to keep this one going, you need to join us and let us know that you're interested, because if we can't get more participation, we'll probably find something else to do with our time other than hanging out in a pool hall. So just notice wherever you access this video that the link for the Zoom meeting at 4 p.m. Central Time will be there. I'm certain that there's been no small amount of apocryphal exaggeration, but there were at least a few examples in those centuries before television and media devices when very wealthy families, and almost always the royalty, kept a court jester in their household to entertain their family and their guests with songs or magic tricks or juggling or storytelling. But a lot of them seem to use humor in order to make political comments, or even to give the king and the queen bad news that no one else wanted to give them. For example, in 1340, when the French fleet was totally destroyed in the Battle of Sluys by the English, Philippe VI's jester told him, those English sailors, they don't even have the guts to jump in the water like our brave French do. It may not have been terribly safe for many court jesters in past centuries to make bold political observations as jokes, but in the modern era, we've had comedians who've been able to do exactly that. In the early part of this century, I think that Jon Stewart's Daily Show commentaries were must-see TV for many of us. In fact, in the 2004 elections, it was discovered that people in their 30s got their news primarily from The Daily Show, more so than from printed newspapers or television news. I have personally kept this autographed portrait of Jon Stewart by my keyboard for years because, in my opinion, he was the best preacher in America, and I've always tried to be more like him. With wit and intellect, he revealed both the absurdity and the hypocrisy of American politics in ways that I don't think any journalists even got close to. By making us laugh, even when he was making us laugh at ourselves, I think we were able to change the way we thought about some things, precisely because before he punched us in the nose, he made us laugh. And he was so agreeable, he made us want to agree with him. And honestly, I did agree with him. For me, Jon Stewart's Daily Show was the only show that I have ever watched religiously in my life, but I never had any significant disagreement with anything he said. However, when he retired from the show, the next generation of political comedy has not been quite so easy to embrace and love. Admittedly, I never miss at least the podcast version of Bill Maher's real-time programs, but he isn't batting 1,000 in my estimation, and he may not be much more than 500. Bill Maher is irreverent, he's iconoclastic, he's controversial, he's fearless in what he says. In short, my kind of guy. But he often talks about things that I don't think he understands. And he asserts things which I believe are demonstrably just not right. However, I recognize a kindred spirit in him because he is always stepping up to the plate and swinging for the fences. I don't think that Bill is always right, but I'm confident that he always believes what he says is right. And I respect that. During the pandemic, he has repeatedly called out the CDC and some of our most famous and reliable spokespersons for science, medicine, and prevention of infection with COVID-19, for never mentioning the one thing that many Americans really could do to prevent serious illness and possible death during the pandemic, and that is lose weight, exercise, and eat a healthy diet. And as much as I appreciate Dr. Anthony Fauci as a generally reliable witness to the best of scientific knowledge through this highly lethal pandemic, even he hasn't always told us the truth. He initially told us not to wear masks. Specifically, in March of 2020, in an interview on 60 Minutes, he said that masks were not especially effective in stemming the spread of the virus. Now, he later explained that he said that because he was concerned that if all of us started going out and buying masks, that frontline healthcare workers wouldn't be able to access enough of the personal protective equipment, the PPE, that would protect them as they cared for patients in the hospital. And I get that he had a good reason for not telling us the truth. But you know, even when the goal is laudable, at the bottom line, if you're not being honest, you're losing credibility. The first rule of psychology is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So once a public official tells a lie, even a lie that has noble motivations, anything else they say can be somewhat suspect. We have to wonder, is this true, or is he spinning the facts in order to manipulate public conduct? Now, don't get me wrong. I always pay attention to what Fauci says, but I understand why his credibility took a hard hit in March of 2020. Now, comedians are virtually never scientists, but they depend upon the disarming nature of humor to be able to say something that we don't want to hear. And speaking for obese people everywhere, we are all pretty sick of fat shaming and the rude way that sometimes total strangers will comment on our size or our eating habits. So it didn't feel good to me when Bill Maher first said in those months before the vaccines were available that the best thing that Americans could do to avoid dying from COVID was to lose weight and to eat a better diet and to exercise. Going into the pandemic, as you can see, 80% of adult Americans were overweight, with 40% of adult Americans being classified medically as either being obese or morbidly obese. And as you might guess, I was one of them. And even more, I had in the past couple of years been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Again, that didn't exactly put me into a rare position because about 10% of adult Americans have type 2 diabetes. So when the medical experts were saying that COVID-19 was especially deadly to older people, particularly those with underlying conditions such as obesity and diabetes, I couldn't help knowing that they were talking about me. But not just me. They were talking about me and maybe 30 million Americans with diabetes or 100 million adults that were seriously overweight. But just as Bill Maher said, the experts talked about social distancing, hand washing, air filters, masks, sanitizing surfaces. But what they never said was, hey, lard ass, push away from the table and lay off the fried foods and sweets. And arguably, that is exactly what they should have said, if not first, at least on a short list of helpful suggestions. Now, I'm speaking very personally today, but this is not all about me. It's about me and about a third of the people who are old enough to drive a car in this nation. People like me would try to follow the rules in public. We kept our distance, we wore masks, we washed our hands. But we were surrounded everywhere we went by non-compliant folks who never even tried to avoid spreading the virus, while millions of us are especially vulnerable to dying if we get sick. Over the years, I've tried almost all of the popular weight loss programs. So if you don't want me to hate you, do not write to me or call me with your suggestions about how to lose weight. I've seen more than a few physicians, some of whom specialized in weight loss. I've worked with personal trainers, and I've eaten more lettuce than a herd of rabbits. I've taken prescription medications. I've taken over-the-counter supplements. I've bought exercise machines. Obesity can be so disheartening because we often don't feel like we're overeating. We don't feel like we're eating a lot of unhealthy foods. And we can feel like the universe is just arrayed against us. Seeing yourself in the mirror or having to go to the big and tall shop to buy your pants can make you so depressed that it leaves you feeling ashamed and hopeless. So the desperation can lead people to wasting a ton of money on fad diets, on exercise equipment, on dangerous supplements, and completely absurd medical procedures, some of which work for a period of time, but the majority of people who get those surgeries, the weight comes back in a year or two, and it usually seems to bring friends with it. Many of us have had successful diets. And when we can get into that zone of daily exercise and eating right, but something always seems to happen. A job loss, a divorce, a spate of bad health, or even, in my case, bad weather that can keep you from walking or jogging outside. And once the weight starts to come back, and all of your skinny friends start to give you unsolicited and uninformed opinions about what you're doing wrong and how you could drop the weight easily, disappointment takes over, and out come the sweatpants and the baggy shirts again. That's been my cycle for 20 years. But then the pandemic comes and a quarantine. We're shut up in the house with Netflix and snack foods. And a national crisis of obesity started to get worse across the board. Last summer, after a physical with all of my numbers on the wrong end of the scale, my long-term, and I believe very smart, very attractive, and extraordinarily slender physician let me whine for a bit about how I've tried everything and nothing works. And she said with a certain exhausted sigh, "Have you ever thought about feeling hungry but still not eating?" Since then, she has denied having said it, especially after I sent her a framed cross-stitch wall hanging for her office that shares over her name, "Have you thought about feeling hungry but still not eating?" It didn't feel good to hear, but folks, seriously, have you ever considered feeling hungry but still not eating? If you have not, then there is a basic issue with dieting that I'm afraid you're missing. Obesity is complicated. There are many reasons why people become overweight. Certainly, our food supply is full of unnecessary salt, sugar, and fat, along with chemicals, preservatives, antibiotics, and then they are all served to us in portions that are 2 or 3 times too big. All of that is to blame. And some people are blessed with a high metabolism, and some even appear to have an almost indifference towards food. I get upset leaving restaurants sometimes when someone's leaving 2/3 of their food on the plate. What are they thinking? But many of us have jobs that keep us sitting at a keyboard for way too many hours in the day. And I know about myself that I am a stress eater. But I am also a boredom eater, and I have trouble sleeping sometimes, a sleep disorder that can be cured almost guaranteed with a bowl of granola or a bowl of ice cream, whichever is the most handy. But folks, you have never seen a newsreel of people coming out of a concentration camp where some of them are skinny and some of them are fat. It's not about metabolism. You don't get fat without eating too much food. The more you get used to eating too much food, the more food it takes to feel full. The more you let stress gets to you, working longer hours, sitting down at your computer, and then getting fast food or processed foods to save time and energy, the more obesity becomes an inevitability. Even when we have taken our turn from our church working in the local food pantry, I realize that all this food that's bought in bulk or donated by food distributors, most of what we are giving to the poor and the hungry is food that no one should eat. Many of them don't even know what to do with fresh vegetables when we sometimes have them to offer because they have been reared eating free or handout food that's usually Pop-Tarts and donuts and cookies and potato chips because these things are cheap, they're universally available, and they're easy to prepare. The pandemic has seen many who were already seriously overweight gaining another 15 or 20 pounds, which not just figuratively, but literally makes them a bigger target for a virus that already seems to really like to live in the lungs of obese people. As I saw my numbers going up after that rather zen comment made by my physician about getting tough enough to just suffer through being hungry without eating, I accepted the offer of a physician friend who wanted me to stay in daily contact with him, reporting my weight, my glucose level, my blood pressure, and my pulse every single morning. And I did that for 6 months until I had lost 50 pounds. This was a huge gift of his time and energy for which I will be forever grateful. I'm now trying to lose the next 50 pounds on my own without the coaching of a physician or medications or surgery, and certainly not wasting my time on supplements and fads that we all really know in our hearts simply do not work. I know a lot of people who've had COVID. I know more than a few people who've had it twice, many after they were vaccinated. And I have known of a few people who have died. This pandemic isn't over yet. And men and women, we need to do the best and smartest things we can to protect ourselves from an early death. As we now face the potential of new and more deadly variants, versions of COVID that may be able to get around our miraculous vaccinations, Bill Maher's uncomfortable statement of truth remains very true. For nearly half of us who are in the second half of our lives, one of the best, if not the best thing that we can do for ourselves is to lose weight, eat more healthy food, and exercise. And if I may add, exercise outside in the sunlight for at least 30 minutes to an hour every day, and try not to make any exceptions. Now, everyone can't afford the kind of medical attention that was simply given to me by a good friend. Most people can't afford to work out with a personal trainer. It gets expensive. Many people can't even afford to shop in the Whole Foods and the health food grocery stores where produce can cost 3 or 4 times as much as it does in much less expensive places. I am relatively certain that the chicken that I buy at our local box store has been fed more steroids than a member of the Russian Olympic weightlifting team. Still, COVID-19 is out there, and it's right now killing more than 2,000 Americans every day. Now, it may begin to go away some this fall, but we don't know that. It may also come back this winter in the company of an especially virulent strain of the flu, and our death tolls could soar once again. But this much I know with absolute certainty: whether the pandemic is ending or just winding up for a new and more deadly surge, you will not be wasting your time if you begin right now to work on getting your weight into the normal range, because normal, ladies and gentlemen, is more than just a setting on your washing machine. You can try to get your cholesterol, your glucose, your blood pressure, and your weight into the normal range. In fact, even though none of us can become younger, almost any of us can feel 10 years younger if we just drop about 20% of our extra body weight. Chances are, even if you have an excellent physician, if you turn to your doctor for help, they will be more likely to prescribe medications than to prescribe an hour of walking outdoors like I'm doing. My physician friends tell me that getting their patients to change their behaviors is nearly impossible. So they prescribe statin drugs to lower your cholesterol. They prescribe antidepressants in the hope that if you are less depressed, you might eat less. Some will even prescribe amphetamines to get you moving more. And these are often really good doctors who are trying their best to help you. But I'm telling you that what you really want is not at the pharmacy. If doctors thought that their patients would actually do it, they would almost all prescribe eating less, exercising more, and spending more time outside and less time in front of your television. Sometimes I think that my 5-mile daily walks are helping me to lose weight, mostly because during those walks, I'm more than a mile away from my refrigerator. I am being personal today because I have reason to believe that at least half of my listeners are also in real danger from the COVID-19 infection or diabetes or an early death due to obesity. I hope that those of you who needed to hear what I've had to say today will find the energy and the resolve to embark on your own journey towards a healthier and longer life. My unsolicited advice is this: without even spending an extra dollar on anything, find a friend or two who want to become more healthy and hold one another accountable. My physician friend wasn't particularly giving me medical advice. He was simply being accountable, making me accountable in a daily way, reporting to one another what your physical, basic health statistics are. At first, maybe even challenge one another to a day of fasting once a week. I have not eaten anything but water and black coffee for the last 24 hours. Fasting will help your stomach to shrink, and it will take less food in the following days for you to feel full. This is not easy for me to do either, but trust me, I'm a doctor. You will not starve. And folks, like it or not, it's nearly impossible to lose weight while regularly consuming alcohol, which is basically sugar. Try knocking off beer, wine, distilled spirits for a month or maybe 2. And if my saying that frightens you and you don't think you could do it, then ladies and gentlemen, you may have issues other than obesity. Seriously, if you cannot decide to not drink for a couple of months to save your health, if not to save your very life, then there are meetings that take place all around you where you can meet some really great people who are also trying to stop drinking. There is no shame in seeking help. There is a shame in refusing help that is readily available and is free. Don't break your heart with drugstore supplements or expensive workout equipment. At least at first, just walk. Walk a lot. Try to walk a little faster every time you walk, as much as you comfortably can. And let your food be your medicine. And by that I mean avoid canned and frozen foods, avoid sugar and grains and potatoes, and focus on fresh fruits and green vegetables. If you eat meat, try to eat more chicken and fish and less beef and pork. Rediscover the flavors and proteins that can be found in beans and the energy that can be found in fresh fruit. Get used to reading labels and try not to eat anything that's got an ingredient that you can't pronounce. And try your best to avoid sugars. Even some of the most healthy sounding things like yogurt can be loaded with corn sweeteners, dehydrated cane, and every kind of disguise to add sugar to your diet. And remember, if they can hand it to you through a drive-through window at a fast food restaurant, you really shouldn't put it in your mouth Honestly, folks, you don't know where that stuff has been. Try to get the stress out of your life. Meditate for at least 20 minutes a day. It really does help. Avoid processed foods. Spend more time in nature and less time inside. Stop watching the news all the time. Eat more fresh fruit and vegetables. And people, clear your conscience by becoming a donor who supports this church and our online podcasts and videos. Trust me, you'll feel better about yourself, and I'll like you more. Try it for a few months and see if it doesn't work.
Amen.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.